Welcome to today's special interview. I've got Richard Hattersley with me from AccountingWEB. Richard, it's the second time we've had you on the show, so you must have done something right. Welcome back.
Well, thank you again for having me, Rob. I thought I ruined it with the first time, but obviously it did okay. So thank you very much for welcoming me back in your house.
Definitely not. You've been in this game a long time. And we talked last time about awards, that whole process of winning awards, the kudos, and patting ourselves on the back and celebrating our achievements as accounting firms and the vendors that serve them. And we demystified a lot of things for sure. Today, we're going to talk about another thing that you're really passionate about, which is mental health and well-being. And tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be interested in this as a subject.
I think as the editor of AccountingWEB, I'm always looking for the latest trends, always looking at what the audience is going through, just what makes them tick. And it was something which started coming up time and time again. And it's something which it was almost said with an apology. It was almost, it was kind of sneaking out in conversations rather than being a central point. And I think it's always been there. I think the issue has always been within the profession. The always-on nature of the job is, it feels like it's ingrained within accountancy. Presentism is probably a big thing there at the large firms. Just the demand of clients on like a 24-hour basis. And I used to do this series on the AccountingWEB called Practice Talk, and I used to speak with accountants on a weekly basis, and I used to ask them. The aim of the article, of the feature, was just charting out what a typical day looks like for an accountant. And the first question I always asked was, "What's the first thing you do when you start your day?" And you never guess what it was. The first thing, which I will say about 100% of the respondents said, was
about 100%. Yes.
About 100. I think there might be the odd one who didn't say this, but roughly all of them said the first thing they did was check their emails.
Yes.
And then as I finished the interview, I'd ask, okay, so you finished the day, you go home. How'd you finish your day? Oh, I check my emails. I think one person even said, I'm checking emails up to the point my head hits the pillow. Wow. And I think that's when I realized that there's sort of a problem here. This always on culture within the profession is sort of spiraling out of control at that point.
And the word overwhelm comes to mind, Richard. I know you speak to a lot of accounting professionals, and there's this sense of anxiety, of overload, of overwhelm, all the regulatory pressures, all the compliance pressures, staying up to date with CPD, CPE, the demands of clients, as you're hinting. And this does speak to well-being that has become such a big issue in the profession, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned there about the regulatory issues, compliance issues. We have accountants on AccountingWEB who are feeling the strain, feeling the stress from the rise of digitalization, the onslaught of never-ending compliance demands, the looming making tax digital rules, which are going to be coming over here in the UK soon, which is basically tax digitalization for any non-UK listeners. And all of this is creating a lot of stress, a lot of there's that feeling of gloom for a lot of firms, which maybe don't feel like they can cope with this sudden shift, this sudden change in what they thought the job was. And I think the last 2 years have certainly not helped either with the never-ending stress of the pandemic.
No, and I'm just thinking of the definition of stress, which they say is where your perceived resources are not enough to handle the perceived demands that are placed on you. And there is so much going on that accountants are feeling like they're not coping, and this manifests as stress, which then is mental well-being and mental health. And maybe you've heard, as I have, that professional firms are now employing mental health first aiders. Have you come across that?
Absolutely, yeah. We spoke on the last time I was on this podcast, Rob, about the Accounting Excellence Awards, and it's becoming a big trend there as well. We're seeing mental first, well-being first aiders. It's just as part of a firm, just part of what they do, and we we are seeing that growing trend within the Accounting Excellence Awards.
And presumably they're dealing with a breakdown or an anxiety attack or something mental at work, an overload, not coping well with the situation. It's not a cut or a broken arm or a slip on a wet floor, is it? This is mental stuff.
It is, and I think sometimes accountants can be silently dealing with this. It's something which they may not feel that they can discuss this openly. It is, and perhaps it might be just part of the nature of the job, where many accountants feel that it's just what's always been done before. So I may as well keep going. Those long hours are what clients and what the partner of the firm expects of me. It might be even what the partner expects of themselves to go through those long hours, and the client demands always being on for their clients. So I think there is a lot of what's happening is being hidden away. There's a lot of silent struggling, I think, is what's happening here.
And I guess some of your readers at AccountingWEB are telling you this jacket over the chair culture, the long hours, as you mentioned. We had a guest called Andy Zolkeld on the show a few months back, former Big Four accountant, talked about the stress he was going through, and he couldn't tell anybody about it because it was a sign of weakness. It was, are you serious about your career? If you can't hack it or put in the hours, you don't get promoted, you don't get recognized. And he really struggled with that and ended up trying to take his own life. So your readers must be telling you all kinds of different stories.
Oh, wow. Well, that story is, well, kind of shocked at that story there, Rob. I must catch up on that podcast. But the readers are saying similar things, and it did start out, as I said before, as more of an off comment, but now it's becoming an actual focus point. They're actually talking quite openly. The pandemic has certainly brought this to the surface because I think so many people were feeling so isolated, and they were all going through this shared trauma. It felt like everyone was going through this shared trauma. They had the same demands from their clients. They had the same personal issues which everyone was going through. They were all kind of figuratively and literally kind of locked away, and everyone was in this same sort of boat. And I think that made many of our readers much more open. They were kind of looking for those shoulders to lean on, and so they found support within the accounting community. And I think the accounting community is an especially strong one which accountants do look out for each other. I think there's that sense of going through this shared experience together, which I've certainly seen within the accountancy profession. And with many people sharing their own experiences, I think that's sort of helped many accountants I've spoken with kind of deal with the issues that they've gone through. So they may have realized that they haven't set any boundaries for clients. They've realized that they've been too open. They've realized that they've wilted to every demand the client may have. And I think speaking openly is really important, because then accountants can see that there's others going through a similar situation, and there are routes to help them manage what they're going through.
And there's been a stigma traditionally, hasn't there, in saying that you can't cope or admitting to any kind of depression or stress or mental health problems. Why do you think that is?
This is a really tough question. I think it goes to the, I'm not sure there's a right answer here, but I think it does go to the root of the actual job. The job itself is a tough one. I don't think we should forget that. It's a very demanding job. I've heard many stories of accountants during the tax season here in the UK, comforting clients who've had like that unexpected tax bill. So there's been that emotional strain, just natural emotional strain, just those small things which I think many accountants take for granted, just part of the job. They're really emotionally distressful things. But then on top of that, there's just keeping on top with the intense workloads and the complexity of the job. There's a real lack of room for error, I think, with the job. And those issues, when you have to be so precise, where you have to ensure that what you're doing is correct, there's no room for error here. That is an immensely stressful thing. There was a recent survey by the accounting charity over here for ICAW members, CARBA, and it said that 79% of the people, respondents for this particular survey, believes that stress and culture and poor mental health is just ingrained within the accounting profession.
Wow.
And then on top of that, 86% of respondents said that, and this is like this stat I felt was really difficult to take on board, but I think it goes to the root of the problem. 86% of respondents said that that employees were not utilizing employee-provided counselling or phone lines, or even, and 46% said they wouldn't take in mental health days. So that says to me that many of these people just kind of trooped on. They just thought they would just carry on because perhaps they thought that their problem wasn't big enough, or there's that stigma that still lingered over the profession, which is why they're not dealing with it. And so it's a difficult one. I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I think the job itself is one which kind of leads to stress.
And I'm glad you brought up the emotional element to that, because as trusted advisors, accountants have not just been the ones with the financial knowledge, but there have been therapists, psychiatrists, counselors, that shoulder to cry on, as you mentioned, that trusted friend in dealing with the emotional fallout of the pandemic with the business owner clients that they have. And that's not something they were trained for, is it?
No, absolutely not. When they sit down to do their exams, whatever professional body they may be with, I don't think there is that that soft skills element of the exam. There's not that part which helps them deal with the with that stress, that trauma, and the emotional issues that go with dealing with a client which is going through a tough time, or having to break the news to a client, or having to deal with any error within your own team, or having to deal with your direct employees going through any stress. So perhaps there should be more. There should be more support there.
Well, in insolvencies, businesses going bust, having to lay off workers, losing livelihoods, getting into debt, all that kind of stress for clients is then something for the accountant and the bookkeeper to pick up.
Absolutely. We've seen that with the pandemic. Absolutely. There's accounting firms have said throughout the whole, have raised this on AccountingWEB throughout the last 2 years, the turmoil that their clients have gone through, and the extent that they've gone through in order to support their clients, and working 24 hours a day through night and day to support clients, and then for them to eventually collapse, their businesses to collapse. It's going to be it's going to be a hard pill to swallow. I think that one is going to be difficult for these firms.
What is the fallout of firms of getting mental health and mental well-being wrong for their people?
It's a good question, Rob. I think getting it wrong, it means that you're not really your firm's not really working at the full power that it should be. It means that not everyone is feeling happy in their workplace. And if your employees are happy, if you yourself are happy, that's naturally going to spread onto your clients in the way that you deal with those client relationships. But if these things are going unrecognized, if your employees are not happy, it's naturally going to spread on to that client relationship. And so it just makes sense for the business, beyond, of course, the human element is more important than anything, but also for the strength of your firm as well. It's just to take notice of what your employees are going through.
And the outlook for firms that don't take mental health and well-being seriously, lost revenues, maybe going out of business, losing competition, losing clients, losing credibility with their reputation.
Yeah, sure. And that recruitment issue as well. We've heard quite a lot about the recruitment crunch. And if you don't feel like your employer is taking you seriously, if you don't feel like they care about you as a person, then you're going to look across to that accountancy firm across the street, the one which does seem like they care about them. And you would feel like your skills would be more suited at that firm. And so I think it's really important to see that human element of your firm, the human element of your staff.
And people that are looking to join a firm, they will ask, how do you look after your staff?
They will.
What's your policy on zero overtime or flexible time or hybrid working? And they ask these things. These younger generation particularly, they care about this stuff. It's not about money and kudos and fast promotions, is it?
It's really important, especially for those Gen Z accountants coming in. We've seen the rise of hybrid working over the pandemic, and it'd be interesting to see how the fallout of that as things kind of return to some form of normality, whether everyone be back to the office or not. But we have seen the rise of hybrid working. We've seen leaders become more cognizant of just general well-being of their employees, and so it would be very interesting to see just what firms are going to be doing to ensure that all the successes, all of the everything that they've done over the past 2 years isn't kind of pushed to one side, and they continue to offer that flexibility, to continue to offer those well-being days, as we're seeing those bigger, larger firms are doing for employees as well.
Well, I wanted to ask you, when you talk to firms that are getting this right, they're dealing with it well, they're meeting the demands of their employees and their clients, are there any examples of initiatives or best practice that they brought in that you thought that will really make a difference?
We've seen that with the Wellbeing Days. I think that's a really good initiative there.
What is a Wellbeing Day, Richard?
I think a Wellbeing Day is those which is beyond just your normal holiday. It's just a day just for you to wrap yourself up in a duvet, I guess, and relax beyond and take a break from work. I think what firms are doing is I think goes back to what I said at the beginning around emails. I think that's a really important one, where there's that order not to check your emails, just to ensure to put a literal block on the emails, just to make sure that your employees are not dipping in. They're not kind of stuck in this web of never-ending work. They can actually take a break because they're then refreshed and ready in the morning to deliver the service which you expect of your employees. Other things include employee satisfaction surveys, employee happiness surveys. We have this for clients. I think an accountant said to me one time that we do a lot of these surveys for clients. We do their client happiness surveys. We do NPS surveys. We check on all sorts of benchmarking and metrics for our clients, but why don't we do the same for our employees? I think that's just as important. So we do get the progressive firms, we do get firms who put the mirror up, and then they look at what they're doing. They're looking at what their employees want. They're looking at what's successful, what's not successful, and how can they change the firm in order to ensure that their employees are just generally happy.
This is terrific, Richard. It's a really strong word in season that accountants need to heed in these challenging times. I'm going to ask you to finish with a couple of words of encouragement or advice for the leaders listening in setting the right culture and expectations so that they take mental well-being seriously. Just before you leave with those, if people want to have a conversation with you, learn more about the great stuff that AccountingWEB are putting out, what's a good way for them to get in touch?
So you can find out more of AccountingWEB from all the news and views from the accountancy world on accountingweb.co.uk. You can follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Just search my name and I'm sure my face will pop up there, and I'll be more than happy to connect with you on any of those platforms.
Brilliant. So in sending people away with a takeaway, a strong message of something they can do, start doing, stop doing, to enhance mental well-being and take mental health seriously for themselves and their firms, what would you leave us with, Richard?
I think it starts at the top. Those interviews I had with those accountants, the ones who said that they check their emails first thing in the morning, they checked them last thing at night. Perhaps break the cycle yourself and see if that filters down to the rest of the team.
Set the example.
Absolutely, absolutely. Maybe have the emails as maybe the third thing you check when you start the day. Maybe do something else. Maybe do something for yourself to start the day. We used to have an agony uncle on AccountingWEB, and his motto was put your face mask on first, using the old expression from airplanes. And I think that's really important. put your face mask on first. Look after yourself first. It's kind of be selfish a little bit. Look after yourself, and then once you feel good, then you'll be able to help others.
That's very good. And on the flip side of that, just to finish, it's important for leaders to be a bit vulnerable as well. And if they try and pretend that they're coping with everything, what message does that give to the staff about them being able to open up?
Absolutely. I think a mutual friend of ours, Lucy Cohen, Rob, has spoken quite openly about this, about being vulnerable, and just how that and how that's brought into her firm, and how that's allowed everyone else to be vulnerable. And I think in this day, that's really important, to be open, because there's no point getting back to that point of having the stigma around mental health.
Yeah. Richard Hattersley, that's been tremendous. What a great topic to address today. Hopefully everyone can be mentally stronger. Thanks so much for your time and your insights.
Thanks for inviting me, Rob.
You've been watching or listening to the Accounting Influencers podcast, featuring hosts Rob Brown and Martin Bissett, with key interviews, what's working in the accounting profession, and news from the accounting and fintech world that helps you do your jobs better. We go out to 144 countries, over 20,000 unique listeners, with 100,000 downloads, and it is accredited for continued professional education and development. Thank you for tuning in.